about that.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for coming out this hot and sultry evening. For those visitors here, restrooms are across the hall. We have water, and if you're so moved during or after, we do have a free will offering back with the rest of the literature. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. The courageous conversation. So the questions for courageous conversations this evening are: is the image of God reflected in how we treat our fellow human beings in our methods of incarceration? As Christians, what is our call to action when our fellow child of Christ is sentenced to prison? What happens to the image of God when the human being enters the system of incarceration? Does the inherent dignity of being human vanish? What is the goal of the prison system? Out of sight, out of mind? Rehabilitation? Retribution? You did the crime, you do the time. What were the circumstances that led the person to the low point of being incarcerated? The standard of treatment for those incarcerated states: all prisoners shall be treated with respect due to their inherent dignity and value as human beings. A few years ago, a friend of mine was incarcerated for something I believe he did not do. Through the criminal justice process, I am watching him slowly lose his human spirit and dignity and value as a human being. I am watching his family being ground down emotionally and financially by the incarceration process. As a Christian and fellow human, I feel an obligation to act in some way to begin to shed the light of God on a very, very dark and ugly problem. My urgency led me to Google, where I was able to find Lois Polano, the statewide organization she created in 2012 called Citizens for Prison Reform. The urgency in her Zoom call with us setting up this talk was loud and clear. The urgency in her emails making sure this event had been advertised far and wide were loud and clear. Tonight's presentation that Lois has created for us grew from: I can drive from Lansing to Tecumseh for a presentation and a question and answer, to a presentation with video shorts and question and answers, to I can bring a mock solitary confinement cell as well, and I have some partners who might be coming with me. Oh, and my husband can load the car. Her energy is boundless, and it is also contagious. So, it's with a heavy heart about the prison system, and with great hope that I have the privilege to introduce Lois Polano and her laser-focused energy of change, to bring us this message of urgency, the need to shine the light of day on this atrocious problem, so that we can all hear loud and clear that the state of the prison system in Michigan needs much improvement. So Lois? Lois? There you are.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. Can you hear me, or do I need to use a microphone? If you'd like a microphone, just raise your hand and let me know. Yes, okay, I can do that, if I can find it. Testing. Testing. There we go. So I just want to thank each one of you for coming. It's a nice summer evening, and you could be doing other things, but you're here. And that means that you're either curious about the system or you know a little bit about the system, but you want to learn more. And I'm curious about your journey, and I'm just wondering if you would mind raising your hand if you've ever been into a prison and visited someone or gone into a prison system. Wow, okay, a good number of you. So, back in 2010, if you had asked me if I would be standing here tonight, if I would care at all about the prison system, I would have told you no, because I was one of those people who thought you do the crime, you do the time. And I thought that I was safer because the criminals were locked up. I was raised in a small town south of here, Waldron, Michigan, so this is my old stomping grounds. We played Tecumseh in sports. And I didn't know anything about the prison system. And you know, if you don't know and you're not aware, then you don't really learn. You don't really understand what's going on inside. And it took my own personal journey of my son being sent into the adult prison system at the age of 15 with bipolar, known long-standing mental illness. And just at the time when my son was going into prison, there was news coming out about a young man who had died a year prior in a Jackson prison from negligence, pure negligence. And I was scared to death, thinking, is that going to be my son? I couldn't watch the news. But I became activated, and my son was inside telling me to Google to search. And I did that, and I found a group, American Friends Service Committee, that was meeting at the Capitol. So I showed up at the Capitol. And there I met Teresa Miller, who is here with us tonight. Tonight is very special to me because there are people in this room who have touched my life, who I've gotten connected with in some way, that have assisted with my own son's case, and it means a lot to me. So Teresa is here tonight, and her son, Tim, died August 6, 2006. And I will never forget that because we were at the Capitol August 6, 2007, when my son had just gone into the system. And that is what activated me. That is what brought me to realize that if I didn't take a stand and do something to change this system, that it could be my son next and someone else's loved one next. And I took a hold, and it really was my pain and anger with what I saw occurring inside that brought me to passion and purpose and to creating this nonprofit, Citizens for Prison Reform. So we became a nonprofit in 2012. And the core purpose, the work that we do, is to assist and support families that have incarcerated loved ones. I did not set out with the intent of starting this nonprofit. We did set out to start a letter writing campaign, and I believe Teresa was involved in that as well. We wrote to every legislator, and we really focused in on the number of juveniles inside the adult prison system. My son was with 7 other juveniles, ages 14 to 17. And they were all in the psychiatric adult men's prison, where they were being held in solitary confinement with 0 time out of their cell because of the fact that they were minors. And I do want to say that we have changed that. They now have a unit at Lapeer where all of the youth go, 26 and under, where they are together. However, if they need
significant psychiatric care, they still have to be put with the adults, where then they're held in solitary confinement. So we are a very grassroots, family-led movement, and we started holding meetings in 2011, monthly meetings in Lansing, bringing families together, offering presentations and educating them about the system and also about things like reentry and about mental health treatment inside the system. We had those meetings up until COVID, believe it or not. COVID is what changed that for us. The good news is, because of COVID, we have now moved to Zoom and virtual meetings. In fact, right now, there's a family support meeting being held as we're speaking for families that have incarcerated loved ones. And because of that, I have a woman here tonight whose family lives up in Marquette, and they have been able to join these Zoom meetings and get involved, and so that is amazing. We have people that have joined us from overseas and New York State and Texas, so our reach has really grown. We do provide direct advocacy. We really work to teach families how to become strong advocates and how to navigate through the system, because the Michigan Department of Corrections does not have anyone doing that. Families are really on their own. We did, after getting involved with legislators, we got legislators to put it into law that they had to create a resource guide and put it on their website. And that was when I recognized and realized the power of working with legislators, that you can really make a difference. So in 2014, I applied for an individual fellowship and was awarded that, and began the family participation program. I recognized early on my inner being did not want to have to work with the Department of Corrections. I didn't want to have to be in the same room with them, but what I knew was we needed to be at the table together. If we were going to bring change, we had to work together. So I went to the department and they agreed to the family participation program. We have posters that are in 15 prisons. And you'll see the poster on the next slide. So these posters are in 15 prisons. We began the family participation program, and the department really came along a long ways. The first thing they said is, we don't think our guide is really what families need. Could you help us? Could you help us review it and tell us what really families need to know? And so we worked on a lot of different things. There are some things that we have worked on since the time that we began the Family Advisory Board, and that was in 2015. I wrote a one-page proposal and handed it off to the director, and I was expecting a big no, that we would create this Family Advisory Board with appointed family members and formerly incarcerated people who would come together to address like the large issues that we saw, general issues that we feel need to be changed, that are impacting families, but also impacting human beings living inside, their treatment, the conditions inside, and the lack of programming. So obviously many of those things have been very slow going. It's been very difficult to get them to move in the direction that we believe they need to move in. For instance, currently when individuals go into the system, they are seen by the parole board and they review what they're in for, their crime, and then they determine what classes they need to take. And these are mandatory classes that they have to take in order to get paroled. But they are not offered those classes until their last 6 months or a year in prison. Now, if you go to the Michigan Department of Corrections website, it states that re-entry begins on day 1. But this simply is not the truth. They have 3 vocational villages that they have created, and they are fabulous. I was able to tour one of those in Jackson. But there is an extremely small number of individuals that have access to that programming. They are the most well-behaved individuals who they see the most potential in, and that is who is getting the vocational village. I believe there's around 400 individuals that complete that programming in a year. Does anyone in here know our current population inside the prison system? So it's 32,000 and some change. So a little over 32,000. That's greatly reduced from what it was, and that is good, but it is not reduced enough. We think we can do better.
Is that Michigan?
Yes, that's Michigan, 32,000. So with this family advisory board, we started meeting in 2015 and we met quarterly. This is something the Department of Corrections had never done before. They were not willing to meet with families. So this was a huge step in the right direction, and we have continued, and during COVID, they actually stepped up our meetings to meet more frequently. We really urged them to create hotlines so that families could know what was going on with their loved one during COVID, because families were calling and getting hung up on by staff, and they couldn't just learn if their loved one was okay because they hadn't heard from them. So they created hotlines. So there have been many benefits to the Family Advisory Board. And 2 years ago, we had a senator who worked with us, and we created a reunification bill, a family bill. And now this Family Advisory Board is in under that bill. It's permanent. They can never get rid of this board. But the family reunification policy has some pretty big things built within it. One of them is when a person goes into the Michigan Department of Corrections, you don't hear from them as a family member. They generally, many of them don't get phone calls, and they're given one envelope. So when they send that one envelope, there is no way for them, they're not there long enough to actually get their store money, purchase another envelope, send it back in for stamping, and get it back. So one envelope's all they get. Families don't know that. Families call us panicking, very anxious. And so one of the things that we are most pleased about is the Department of Corrections will now be sending an orientation packet to a loved one on the outside within their first 7 days of incarceration. And we were able to give input on that packet. So that has been a huge improvement. There are many other things that we are going to have to really advocate to get implemented. These are the posters that are hanging in 15 prisons, and I know some of you in this room are still going for visits. We would like to know if you see the posters hanging, and they're supposed to be in the waiting rooms, not only in the waiting rooms, but now in the units. So that incarcerated individuals can take, there's tear-off sheets on them, they can take that information, send it home to their family, and get connected to us so that we're able to help teach them how to advocate, help deal with their problems, the issues that they're dealing with, and help support them. You know, many families don't know. Just this week we had a family that we've been working with for quite some time, and they told us that their loved one has a parole hearing in July. And we said, well, you've done the packet, right? We have a webinar on how you need to do a packet. And they had not seen that. So families don't know the simplest thing. You need to put together a packet and send it to the parole board office. That is your loved one's best chance for getting released. It's kind of like an interview, preparing for an interview. and putting together letters. And so there are just so many things like that, that how would you know? And so we believe this model of family to family, so we have family advocates helping other families navigating through. We've assisted 5 families in getting legal guardianship whose loved ones had severe mental illness, and we were able to get the courts to agree that they needed guardianship. And so these are just some of the things that we do. And the next thing that I want to share with you is that we have legislative priorities that we have set. And it's unfortunate some of them have been the same priorities over the last few years because it has been very difficult to get legislators on board to care about our people inside of prisons. It's been very challenging. One of the issues that we are working to address is we have, in 2019, there were 1,100 individuals inside who had their visitations taken away indefinitely. And right now, we have families who have not had visits in 10 years, 6 years, 4 years. And generally, this is because they have 2 substance use tickets that they received within a 5-year period. Now, a substance use ticket can be anything from, yes, having hard drugs, which are inside the system, believe it or not. It's gotten worse now than ever. It can be spud juice, which is homemade alcohol. It can be a cigarette. It can be expired Tylenol. It can be for cheeking their medications, which is something that people with mental illness frequently do. So this is what they get tickets for. And we have families who are hurting and people inside who are hurting. They don't even know what each of them looks like because it's been so long since they've seen each other. So what I want to share with you now is a Zoom documentary that we had a videographer offer to build for us right before our legislative day last month because he was so appalled with this practice. And this is one of the family stories that I'm going to share with you.
Who picks up the phone number that was on that poster?
We do.
So it's an office that, or?
So we all are working virtually in our homes, but we have a family coordinator who lives in Wayne, Michigan. And right now she is taking those calls. And then I'm taking the calls that come in to Citizens for Prison Reform's phone line.
Thank you.
So this is the administrative rule that our legislators created that says the director can take visits permanently.
It's such a powerful story and really, I think, on the extreme of what we're trying to raise awareness about. I understand that you have a brother who's been in the prison system, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. And is it Tyler, right?
Yes, his name is Tyler.
Okay. So Tyler actually has been diagnosed with some serious mental illnesses, is that correct?
Correct. Yes, bipolar and borderline personality disorder.
So has he been offered any treatment for that while he's been incarcerated?
Well, that's kind of where the problem started. Was he was in Marquette Branch Prison, and they started giving him different medications for mood stabilizers, depression, for the bipolar, and they were taking him off the medicines. They were switching his medicines and not weaning him off or giving any time in between. They were just switching it and switching it and switching it, and it kind of made him go into a mental breakdown.
So he ended up having one incident then while he was incarcerated, probably during that transition time. he threw a cup of urine at an officer or something?
Yes, he said that he had like gotten to his breaking point and he just didn't even think and did it, and that they had tried to say that, you know, he was mentally unstable, but they're still trying to add a life sentence for that incident, and they're trying to do a mental evaluation, but the bottom line is they want to add life to his sentence.
So in the meantime, though, is it my understanding that he's been put in solitary confinement in the isolation area?
Yep. Yep, he's in a higher level sorry. He's in a higher level, so he's by himself. He says he's locked down 23 hours. He gets 1 hour out a day, but he usually doesn't take it because he said he sleeps throughout the day usually, and is just very depressed and stays up at night, so he usually doesn't even really get out for his hour a day.
Have you been able to get in and have any visits with him?
The only visit I had was right after my mom passed away. We got a special visit, and that's been the only time in 5 years I've got to see him.
And your mother just passed away. What happened there? It's a tragic story.
Yeah, well, so she was really like the advocate for him before she passed, and we both were working hard to try to get him help because we knew he was struggling. And she started struggling, and she ended up committing suicide last September due to everything with my brother.
Such an extreme and tragic outcome, and so I think that speaks for itself on how this can impact family members. And how has this isolation impacted Tyler?
He's struggling. He's trying to go through losing our mom, and he just is like, he doesn't have the support, he doesn't have the mental health, he doesn't have his family able to be there. So it's just been really hard.
And I can tell it's been very difficult on you as well, correct?
Yeah, our father passed away too, so I'm the only one to help him now, so.
Okay. And really, other than trying to feed a bunch of chemicals through him, they're really not really doing anything.
They haven't done anything. They said they were going to bring in a special counselor after our mom passed away, and nothing's really came. He said he had one thing where they did like a suicide watch at the beginning and had somebody speak with him then, but nothing since.
That's very powerful, and I'm so appreciative of you sharing all of this. It's extremely painful, and it must be very difficult. So we thank you so much and wish you the best. Hopefully, Tyler's going to get the help that he needs as well.
So, Destiny is one of the family members that we are walking alongside with right now. And we are working with her currently to gain guardianship over him so that she can file grievances against the Department of Corrections. There is a federal law that an incarcerated individual cannot sue the Department of Corrections unless they have gone through the 3-step grievance process. And if you can imagine someone like Tyler, how could he ever make it through? There are many people inside who cannot read and write. And this is a federal law. This is not a Michigan law, this is federal. And this is something that we need to ask to be changed federally. It's wrong, it should not be this way, but our goal is to have her gain guardianship so that she has more power, so she can file grievances, and hopefully we can help find an attorney for her, because we believe that Tyler's treatment is inadequate and not at all what it should be, along with
thousands of others inside this system. It's very difficult. So, you know, we built up the family participation program, and we've met all these families along the way. And we've met more and more families who have loved ones like Tyler that are sitting in solitary confinement, which is what we call it. The department calls it segregation. And this is where an individual is held in a cell, like this model over here. We've been told recently by many formerly incarcerated that this is far too big. So we try to be gracious because we don't want to make it smaller than what it really is, but this is pretty large. They're spending 22 hours, 23 hours, some of them 24 hours a day inside, and they're fed through the small slot in the door. If they get an hour out, they back up to the door and they're shackled through that slot. Their only human touch is by the brushing of an officer. When they're in segregation, they have limited phone calls. And if they get tickets, which means that they did something wrong, can be something minor or something major, but they then lose phone calls for sometimes a week, but often it's for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And for individuals, particularly who have mental illness, that are not receiving the right treatment, and they're definitely not getting the therapy or the help dealing with trauma that they need, these tickets start stacking up. So when my son was in, he had 7 years of loss of privileges. He was going to be out and released before he could have a TV, a radio, music, and this all stacks up. He did get phone calls, but they would be shut down at times. And so because of all of our families, these families coming together that we were meeting, that we're experiencing having a loved one in solitary confinement, we were offered in 2019 to join the Unlock the Box campaign, which is a national campaign to bring an end to the use of solitary confinement across the U.S. in our prisons, jails, and juvenile detention facilities. Currently, we are primarily working with the prison system. We do have a couple of jails that we have begun working with, and I can tell you that it's going to be more challenging than what I thought. We picked the most progressive jails to go to, but we learned that they still have this attitude that when somebody does something wrong, they need to be locked down for days and not be allowed to have anything in their cell, programming, or anything positive to do. And so we have a lot of work to do here in Michigan. And we're up for the challenge. I'm going to the Genesee County Jail Thursday evening, tomorrow evening, to visit that jail. So 2019, we started this campaign. And as I have shared with you, most people are held in this kind of a space for 22 hours a day. They get 1 hour out, supposed to be 1 hour out to an isolated yard. And there is a binder inside the cell. If you choose to look at it, there is a caution on the front of it. There are graphic photos inside of individuals who have lost their lives inside solitary. And my son, photos of my son that I got out from him being at Ionia, shackled and restrained. He was hogtied for 18 hours straight, and the officer propped open a window in January. I share these photos and these truths because these things are still occurring today, right now. And I have stated when it stops and when I know things have changed,
then I will stop sharing the photos. But I believe people need to understand the realness of what is occurring inside the system. So in 2020, we reached out and asked the Department of Corrections for data on their segregation numbers, and they provided that to us, which was rather shocking. They provided it to us. I don't think they knew that we were going to utilize it in a report. So we wrote this report, Solitary, the Family Experience. You can find all this information on openmydoor.org. So we have a website just for the Open My Door campaign. And this has family stories. We surveyed families, and it has the data, and it has a list of some of the individuals that we know and their story of how they died inside a solitary confinement. Inside the report, and with the data that we gathered, we learned that 3,211 individuals in Michigan spend more than 20 hours a day in isolation. We learned that 65% of those held in solitary confinement are Black, and that 378 individuals have been held from 6 months to 20 years in solitary confinement. Honestly, since COVID, things inside have gotten worse. I'm sure you've heard they're very short-staffed. So they are having, not only with officers, but with mental health staff, nurses. And so the solution has been to keep people locked down more. And so since COVID, that has gotten much worse, and the programming is really, some of it just starting to begin again since COVID. We then also produced another very short report, and these reports are back on the table in the back, along with some other documents. Looking at solitary confinement as a public health crisis, because it is. This is a public health crisis. We looked at the surveys that the department did on employees, and what employees are experiencing is traumatic. And we talk with families, their families. What their families experience are traumatic because they're bringing all of this home, the violence, what they see. We have got to stop the vicious cycle. And I think the other big thing in this report that really came out is the fact that when an individual has lived in solitary confinement for a significant amount of time, my son spent his last 2 years in solitary in Indiana. He was released 2 years ago. There is a huge impact on their medical and mental health, like their general well-being once they get out. They actually need more mental health and medical health care than other individuals who are coming out because of what they endured inside solitary confinement. We noticed the day he got released that he couldn't see well. We took him into a store to shop for clothing, and everything was very blurry. And we stopped to think about, if you're only inside of a cement white 6x9 space, he could touch the sides of the cell that he was in, that his eyes had to get used to looking beyond that distance. I think the other thing that we have to really stop and realize is who all is solitary impacting and affecting. Most people think, well, it's the person inside. They got what they deserve. They're deserving it. They did something horrible inside. But the impact on families is hugely significant, and I'm sure Teresa can talk about that. I know I can. I've had arrhythmia. I've had numerous broken teeth. I'm type 1 diabetic. I really, truly believe because of the stress. I have anxiety. And it's there, and it's just this constant feeling that you never forget. So another thing that the department does for individuals is they will restrict their food and water. Some individuals, incarcerated individuals, are so desperate to get out of their cell that they may flood it. I had nurses up in Marquette tell me that worked at the hospital, not in the prison. Happened to meet a nurse at a hotel I was staying at, and she had tears just streaming down her face, saying that primarily what she saw at the ER where she worked were individuals who had either overdosed or cut themselves because they were so desperate to get out and to have human contact that they would do whatever it took. And so some individuals flood their cell by, plugging the toilet and flooding it so that they have to be gotten out of their cell space. So then the department shuts off their water. And this is how some individuals have actually died, because they shut off their water in the heat of the summer and they did not give them water like they should have. And so they actually died of dehydration from having their water shut off. I think that the other thing we have to realize right now is with this heat. Most of our prisons where segregation or solitary is at do not have air conditioning. So think about that as well. Very difficult. So I'm now going to play a short 8-minute documentary. Michigan is highlighted in this documentary. And it was actually created by National Unlock the Box, who has funded us to do this work. And it's a pretty powerful documentary. I do want to mention to everyone here, this is traumatizing, right? To hear all of this, and especially for those of you who know someone inside or you had someone inside. I want you to know, if you go to the Open My Door website, we have created a fabulous mental wellness toolkit that you can get on anytime, day or night. There are groups there are podcasts, there are all kinds of resources for you to be able to use. So we just like to make sure that everyone knows that in case you are traumatized and you struggle once you're home, that's available for anyone here. So again, 8 minutes, extremely profound.
The greatest form of torture for a human being is to be ostracized or isolated. And this is isolation at its highest form.
You have inmates who have mental health issues who cut themselves. So there's blood all over the place. It's never quiet, ever. Ever. People yelling and screaming and arguing and banging. It was like hell, man. I have seen solitary confinement break people. And when I mean break, unrecognizable as human.
There are a lot of broken souls in prison, and what we're doing isn't helping. What we're doing is creating undue harm, the cycle.
Solitary confinement causes immense psychological harm. This is an undisputed fact. Very high anxiety, panic disorder. The rate of suicide in solitary confinement is sky high. So there is zero gain, and then there's a tremendous amount of harm. And the harm is lasting.
This cause is more important to me than anything. I mean, this is history. We are on the path of what prison reform is.
Unlock the Box was launched in 2018 to address the issue of long-term solitary confinement in the U.S. with the goal of going state by state and providing a national campaign effort to amplify the voices of those most impacted.
So can you tell me what she was like?
Laylene, she was great. She was like a soul that you only meet once in a lifetime. It was me, Laylene, and Solomon, and I was the oldest, and Laylene was the baby. She was very giving. Her heart was very forgiving. She came out as being a transgender woman. It was October 31st. I will never forget the Halloween, 2004. She went outside and nobody recognized her. Another person was like, "You're so beautiful, wow." I think that was confirmation enough for her. She was very happy. She started her transition as a transgender woman. My sister did get a lot of rejections from jobs. She was rejected from every door that she knocked on. My sister was placed in solitary confinement simply because of her gender identity, not because she did anything wrong, just simply because of her gender identity.
I watched women go in for minor infractions and then end up being there like months into years.
Majority of guys in solitary are not there for assault. They're not there for trying to escape. They're not there for weapons. They're there for breaking minor and oftentimes petty bureaucratic rules and regulations.
You could tell in the video that they knew something was wrong, but they didn't make any attempts into finding out. You could see them knocking and getting no response from her and continuing to walk around. And then later on, you'll see them laughing at her. Open the door, and they sitting there having a conversation, looking at her. You could clearly tell they were laughing at her. The last thing I seen was my sister in a body bag coming out. I promised her that as long as I'm living, I will make sure that they remember her, and I will make sure that they don't get away with what they did to her.
When you're away in those solitary cells, you really feel like the world don't give a about you, man. To see that there's people out there who actually care to affect change was really humbling.
What I've learned is if we spend more and more time managing the person and not the behavior, the outcome drastically changes. We begin to understand who the person is, what motivates them, what is the pre-contemplation of change, what do they want to do, where's their belief system, and that could be totally different from mine, but that's part about learning who people are and how we can help them. It's rewarding because the message that we're talking about is changing lives of those in custody and changing lives of those that work there.
The recidivism rate of people who have been in solitary is sky high, much higher than the average prisoner. So we're actually defeating the purpose. They say they put people in solitary to control violence in the prisons or to punish. But actually, the truth is what it causes is an increase in crime and violence.
The basic thing that humans need is human contact.
There was nothing there in the system that prepared me to come out better. It prepared me to come out bitter. There, but for the grace of God and the wonderful people I had in my life, I would be that person.
Americans should be horrified by the torture that's happening in our name. Everything we have on the website is a tool for you to learn more about solitary, take action in your own community or on a national level.
If we don't do it, who's going to do it? We have to rewrite laws. We have to rewrite legislations. We have to rewrite the entire structure of the criminal justice system.
Justice is not going to just come at your doorstep. You have to get up and do something. Instead of sitting home, I'd rather be out there fighting. It's very powerful when we come together as one. It's the only way to break the system that hurts us so much.
So we have spent a lot of time talking about how the system needs to change and what's wrong with it and how horrific it is. Now we want to focus on solutions that we believe are viable, that would save taxpayers a lot of money, that would save lives, that would help people come home in better shape than what they are currently. And we have looked at what other states, some states have done that have brought change. Toby Tooley, that was in that video, is my hero. I read an article that he wrote about changing a man's life after he came back from Norway. He was in Norway and he called his boss and he said, if I come back to work and you're gonna tell me that I have to keep doing things the way I have been doing things, he worked on death row and solitary confinement. He said, I'm done, I'll resign right now while I'm in Norway. And so his boss said, sure, I'll let you try it. And he came back and he took the worst of the worst individuals that they had who was throwing urine and feces on them all the time. And he, one-on-one, started having conversations with this individual and asking him, what did you used to like to do? And he said, well, I used to draw. I was an artist. So they brought in chalkboard paint and painted a wall in the cell. And he began just drawing the most beautiful murals. And it was very clear that he was no longer having the behaviors that he did before, because he had something positive to do, something that he loved to do. And so they got to know him a little bit better, started having more conversations, and they learned that he also used to be a musician. So they decided to take a gamble and they brought in a guitar and he broke out in the Prison Blues song. And that to me says people inside have inherent worth. People have within them things that we need to be looking for, ways they can contribute, ways they can give back to our society. And we're missing the boat in how we're treating individuals. So we want to see de-escalation cells in every single prison, where an individual actually, when they know that they're starting to lose it, or they're starting to feel this stress, to be able to go in and have sensory tools, like a basketball or something, a bouncy ball, something that they can utilize, something that they can do. Painting cells with bright murals, and therapeutic cells in seg setting where they have the ability to have things like music, and again, sensory integration items and programming. They need to have programming even if they are locked in a cell. So this is a quote from Toby Tooley, and this is what they have done in a lot of their cells, is just simply painted beautiful murals and positive quotes, and they're seeing how much it has changed the environment by treating human beings like human beings instead of like animals. So we do have currently a segregation bill. It's in for its second draft. That's one of the things that we are working on. We have the other legislation that I spoke about that has also been put in to change the administrative rule that allows the director to take visits permanently from families. And the next big thing that we're beginning to work on is we believe there needs to be a corrections oversight commission, a separate commission to oversee corrections with a group of people, some of whom would be citizens, formerly incarcerated, professionals, who would be able to get into the prisons and tour them, and would bring all of the data. There's, the general auditor, they go in and audit prisons, and they've got reports one place, and then we have an ombudsman's. He's not been reporting on anything, but he's going to start because we have a bill and we're changing that as well, so that he will have to start reporting out the number of complaints by facility that he's receiving and what he's doing with those complaints and how the department is responding. And then we have the segregation bill. And our intent is, with this segregation bill, no one should be held more than 15 days in a segregation cell. If they are held longer than 15 days, they have a right to a hearing in front of a law judge. No longer a piece of paper that is slipped under their door that says they refuse to sign their seg review that's done monthly. Over and over again, this is what we see. Individuals that have been held in there for years. And we had an individual up in Baraga just recently who just completed a year in segregation, and he sent all of his seg reviews. It says he's doing great. Recommendation, continue segregation. And now they've told him he's done a whole year and not gotten any tickets, and they told him he's gonna do another year.
Oh my God.
We are trying to get creative, and we are trying to find more ways to fight this system. We are working with higher entities, national entities, and the ACLU, trying to bring these cases to them, and they're concerned as well. So that's a good thing. We're hoping that we're on the road to some real change. So if you want to know what you can do to get involved to bring change, if you go to the Open My Door website, we have these take actions set up where you can click, and if you put in your address, it will tell you who your legislators are. There's a sample right up there, and one of them I believe will go to the governor's office. We are asking for oversight is one of the things that we're asking for. And we have many other ways you can get involved. You can definitely step up and volunteer if you so would like. We have a team right now of 4 volunteer correspondents that are writing individuals inside. Primarily, they're individuals who either are in solitary confinement or they have been in solitary confinement. When we started the campaign, we sent in through a newsletter inside a request to hear from individuals in solitary. And the first 100 letters that we received are on this website called Silenced Voices from Solitary. So you can just Google Silenced in Solitary, Michigan, and this will come up. The first 100 letters are there. There are pieces of art. There are recorded phone calls. You can actually also search by subject matter. You can search by different types of feelings like anxiety or depression, and read about what they are going through inside the system. We now have received close to 700 letters. These volunteer correspondents are individuals from churches, and individuals are all women currently, but we work to set up action steps that the people inside can take. We sometimes print them sheets from our mental health toolkit. There's printable sheets there, and they really enjoy doing those. But we give them steps like making sure that they've filled out CHJ 121, which is the HIPAA form. The department's supposed to give that to everyone when they go in. They're supposed to be able to have it on an annual basis to renew that, so that if something happens to them, either mentally or medically, family on the outside can know what's going on with them. We find families repeatedly who don't hear from their loved one, and they find out that they're in the hospital and they have no clue why, and the department will not tell them anything because this form was not in place. So that's one of the first things that we start, and that is in the family reunification policy as well. They now are going to have to give it to them when they enter, and we will see if that improves. But we also work to connect with their families out here. So if they have loved ones on the outside, we work to connect with them, to teach them how to advocate, how to get involved. And part of getting involved is coming to the place where you realize that we have to have our leaders in this state bring change. And it's gonna take each one of us going to them and saying, this is not okay with me as a human being, as a taxpayer. This is not okay, and we need to fix it, and we need to change it. I think the problem is the prisons are behind the tall walls, right? We don't see and deal with them on a daily basis. But we do deal with potholes and bad roads and many other things, schools. Those are right next to us. We're driving by them, we see them. Somehow we have to bring ourselves to care about this system that incarcerates. And I would like to share with you some big news that happened here yesterday in Michigan. And it's a day of history. In 2019, we had an individual, John Lancaster, who got into a fight, and he was sent up across the bridge, which is often what they do, and he was sent up there and put in solitary confinement. He had a mental health breakdown, became totally psychotic. Last night I spent reading the doctor's notes and some of MDOC's records to refresh my memory, because it had been a couple of years since I looked at them. There is no doubt in my mind that he became psychotic. It's clearly stated by the doctor. He thought that they were poisoning him, so he stopped eating. He lost 50 pounds in 3 weeks. And he became unresponsive. And so when he didn't comply and come to the cell door, they then chemically sprayed him 5 times and pepperballed him 3 times. And then they put him in a restraint chair. And 3 days later, John died. We are fortunate that his sister Danielle reached out when she found that we were doing a family survey on solitary confinement, and she is deeply embedded in our work and in our campaign. And we have walked beside her for the last 3 years. We have done letter writing campaigns to prosecuting attorneys in the UP, asking them to charge these staff that were responsible for her brother's death. She won a civil lawsuit, and prosecuting attorneys say, well, you won that lawsuit, you got that money, and most all of them got fired. Isn't that enough? No, it's not enough. We continued. We held a rally at the AG's office because the case kept getting sent around, sent it back down to our AG's office in Lansing. And that was in the last 6 months that we held the rally. And yesterday, they wanted Danielle to come and meet with them. So she went and met, and they informed her that they were charging 8 MDOC employees with felonies for her brother's death. I believe 6 of them were manslaughter charges, and 2 of them were a lesser charge. But guess what? That is not good enough for us. Our legislators had put into the budget this year, it was in the budget, the governor put into the budget, and DOC wanted body cams. And we believe body cams are absolutely necessary. In the last month, both the House and the Senate removed body cams from the budget. So at this moment, body cams are not going to happen. So we are having a rally. We have decided today we are going to have a rally. There's going to be an in-person rally at the Capitol next Wednesday. They go into session next Wednesday. Here's the deal, they're voting on the budget next week. I was in 7 offices today, and I had Republican leaders tell me and Democratic leaders tell me they can get it in the budget. It is their choosing. They can put it in the budget. It is not too late. So we are fighting, and we want body cams inside of our prisons. We believe it's necessary. The other thing that we're asking for currently, the Department of Corrections has 1 report that they produce, and it's on administrative segregation. That's one type of segregation. There are numerous types of segregation. There's punitive segregation. There's, they put people in what they call protective custody, but they're literally in segregation. They're treated like they're in segregation. There's notice of intent. We don't even know how many people or where they're at. Their security threat group, they're treated like they are in segregation. Not allowed to get their GED, not allowed to have any employment, held in cell 22 plus hours a day. We've gotten 4 individuals off from that, from going to the ombudsman's office. So we want a full data report, a disclosure of all of these breakdowns by race, because we know that people of color are the ones that are held in segregation and for the longest periods of time. And we want it broken down by facility. So those are our asks. You can get involved. We are going to start this the evening before. So if you can't come to Lansing, that's okay. You can join us, and we will help you find your legislators if you don't know who they are. We also do have that on the website, but we will help you find them. We are asking you to call and to write them and tell them that you want these two things to happen next week before they shut down for summer. So with that, I don't know, Teresa, is there anything that you would like to share with everyone here? I just want to say that, you know, I'm fortunate. My son is still alive. He's not well. I don't think he will ever be well. But to go through what Teresa and Danielle have, knowing how their loved ones died, I can't imagine the pain that they have to carry. So I thank you, Teresa, for being, I'm not sure this is working. It kind of seems like the battery died or something.
I guess, I don't know, it's not working. My name's Teresa Miller. Timothy Joe Souders was my son that passed away in 2006 in Jackson Prison. And the only reason that his story was such a big story was because at that time in Jackson Prison, it was under a federal law, under a federal court order, and they had cameras in segregation because of the federal court order. This body camera thing that Lois is talking about is something that is really needed inside of the prisons. If it hadn't have been for the cameras that was inside the prison, nobody would have known what happened to Timothy, because he died at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they didn't call me until 10 o'clock that night. And when they called me, all they said was that my son had passed away. They didn't say how he had passed away or anything. And it took us weeks before we finally knew that he had died of dehydration when the autopsy came back. And then what happened was that another inmate had called the federal oversight person and said that you need to come in here and look at the cameras and see what happened to this young man. And he had been locked up in the segregation unit in the restraints for 19 hours without anybody checking on him, and he had literally died of dehydration. So these cameras are really needed, and if you can, contact your legislators or go to the rally next week. It would really help out a lot. I mean, it's something that's really important, and everything Lois has been talking about is really important. I haven't talked a lot or been to a lot of the meetings and stuff lately because it just got too hard for me. You know, it's been very painful. It's hard on the families. A lot of people do die in segregation, and the people that survive segregation, they're just not the same. And once you go inside that room, if you look in that folder and see the pictures, you'll understand how awful it really is. And that's just really all I got to share tonight.
Thank you so much, Teresa. I appreciate you coming.
So with that, I think we'll open it up to questions, if any of you have questions. Or anything that you would like to offer. I know some of you have experiences, right? Yes.
Your slide said 65% blacks were incarcerated. What is the actual total prison population based on that percentage?
The 65% are the number that are actually held in segregation, solitary. So 65% of those held in solitary are Black or African American. I do not have that figure. That actually may be back in the report. I'm not remembering it right off the top of my head. But we did get that information from the department when we got the data. So I think it's in that report, giving the numbers. What we do know is it's really unfortunate, but often they do ship people of color and black people up across the bridge. These prisons up there are notorious in some of the worst run prisons. It's very isolated up there, and primarily who is living and working up there? White people. So there is a lot of injustices that are occurring. It's also where they send people who are troublemakers, who, they sent my son up to Marquette. He did 9 months in solitary there. And they told one of the legislative members, this was after we'd started our organization and this work, and they said, this family needs to have their relationship torn down. That's the whole problem. They're just too close. And so you know what we did? He got 4 visits a month. And for the 9 months that he was there, he got every single one of those visits. I had to reach out and find a family up there that I could stay with because I was extremely poor and I couldn't afford a hotel. And my mom kicked in and helped a sister of mine to go up, and his dad went up. He got every single one of those visits. There was only one snowstorm where I got stuck up there a couple of days longer, but we made it up. We got up there and the phones did not work in segregation. You would pick up the phone and you couldn't hear because he would have a phone and then there's a glass and then a phone. And we just spent the whole time saying, I can't hear you, and we're trying to press the button. So we went to the warden and we said, these phones aren't working. And they said, well, there's nothing we can do about it. Well, we came back down to our legislators, and the next week we went back up, there were new phones installed. Our legislators hold power. And I just want to say that former Representative Dudley Spade, who is here tonight, I have told so many stories about him because he did some amazing things for my son. And it was because of my mom, who lived in Waldron, drove to Adrian to a coffee hour. And he got my son 1 hour out of his cell when he was at Adrian. So we got 1 hour out with an officer escorting him to a yard because he was 15 years old. And then he also made it possible that I could have a NAMI advocate go with me to my son's treatment team meetings because Adrian, they knew I was bringing this person. It was all laid out, and when we got there, the staff refused to let this gentleman in with me. And so when I left, picked up the phone and called, and that got fixed as well. So never forget that your legislators do have power and do have the ability to bring change.
I have a son that's incarcerated. He's been incarcerated for 10 years now. And during that time, I've spent a lot of time in and out of prisons and this type of thing. But not only the areas that you're working on, but there are so many more areas that need to be touched on and everything. When I went to visit him at one prison, I was sexually molested by the person that was doing the shakedown on me going in there. I complained about it. I called the warden's office. I called, several people in it. I called my legislators, and everybody says, well, there's nothing that can be done about that. They said, well, the cameras are there. Well, they couldn't tell me who I was with going in on there, what I was wearing or anything like that. So basically, the cameras showed nothing. In addition to that, because I have, I'm a type 1 diabetic, I have had a lot of problems with this over the years and everything, and because I was wearing an insulin pump, I had problems. This guard takes me aside, she says, well, I want to see the whole thing, so like bury your whole self in front of them and everything.
So if these are problems that you continue to have in this type of a situation, we would go to the corrections ombudsman's and we would actually ask him to get the video and to view the video. I wouldn't trust just the Department of Corrections at that facility to view the video.
I mean,
So, yeah,
But there are just
there's
so many things that
Yes.
go on.
there are many things that need fixing, that is for sure, and many wrongs, and individuals in the system can create their own rules, and it's all very subjective. And so that's one of the problems that we see frequently. So we want and need a culture shift inside this system. That's the bottom line. We really need a culture shift.
And right now,
so.
Michigan has, you know, as far as, you know, the family involvement, this type of thing, they have turned all of their appointments for visitation over to GTL. And, you can't get through, the site doesn't work. You can't get through it to make your visits. It's been 2 years since I've been able to see my son since COVID first started out because of all of the restrictions, all of the things. The facility that he's at, they were for a long time allowing 8 visits, and that is to 8 prisoners was the maximum that they could have in the facility at any one time, and they had like 2 days.
You are right. The visitations have gotten much worse since COVID. You now have to get an appointment. You can't just show up.
You can't even call for the appointment. You have to do it online.
Correct. And our organization is now going to be taking this on because the Department of Corrections made no plan for individuals who don't have access to internet, don't have a computer, don't have cell phone, and there are people who don't have emails. We've helped 3 families now where we've created an email for them so that they could get onto GTL and get set up to actually get an appointment to go for a visit. Their solution that they just came up with, other than having us help, was that a family could drive to the prison and have the officer at the desk help them set up their appointment. Well, that officer isn't going to create an email for them. And first of all, should you really have to drive 3 or 4 hours just to go set up the appointment? Then you can't get in for 2 weeks. You have to schedule 2 weeks in advance. We have continually, the Family Advisory Board has been pushing them to let up on these restrictions, to get food back in the visiting rooms. I think they finally just started allowing people to go in unmasked just in the last couple of weeks. So it is a much harsher system than before. Like I said, COVID has really, as we know, it's changed all of our lives, right? But for people inside and for families that are dealing with this, it's much worse. But if you see me afterwards, some of these things I think we can help you with.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Again, there's documents in the back, and yeah.
If I could just say a couple of words. First of all, Lois and Teresa, we call this a Courageous Conversations series, but the courage of the 2 of you and all of the families that you spoke about tonight, I think we're all, I mean, I'll speak for myself, but I think I'm just feeling really overwhelmed. I'm so grateful for you and for this organization and for the tirelessness, but I'm also really feeling, humbled to be in this room with you. And I know Ruth came to me and said, can we pray for you all? Can we pray? But not maybe just even the 2 of you, because I think there's a number of people here who are sort of feeling like in need of prayer. There's a number of people, Carol Lou and the Smiths, the people who have family members and who have friends and so this has been a really it's been a really powerful conversation, but a very profound and heavy conversation.
Yeah, and I apologize.
No, I think this is we've talked about this before. Why do we go into conversations of heartbreak and heartache? Why do we choose on a night like this and a beautiful summer evening to come into this room It's because we really are, we are connected at the heart level with each other as human beings, and we are called to care for each other's humanity. And so if we don't hear the stories, if we don't go to the places, then we are not being fully and truly human with each other. So I wonder, and then this is another thing that I know you want to open this up for people to come and see, and I want, you know, yes. So and conversations after and everything else. But I wonder if we might just, I don't know, Diane's sitting with me too. She's a colleague in ministry, and Jody is Jody still here? Jody is a colleague in ministry here as well. And I just wonder, I wonder if we might just kind of collectively pray. Maybe you guys are back there and you can add, and you don't have to be clergy to pray, but just maybe we open up a time of prayer with each other. And you know, Ruth was suggesting too, we do this thing at our church, and I think, it's not just our church, but a laying on of hands in prayer. And so I see you're going over to be with her, and I think, you know, if you want to just even put a hand on the shoulder of somebody next to you, there's something powerful too. You talked about this, about human touch. And so there is this way in which I wonder if we aren't able to channel human touch with each other too. So let's pray together. God, our hearts break as we hear stories of your children in pain and in suffering. So many children, not the incarcerated children, those who are sent to serve them in staff-related capacities and inside prisons, who come home to their families traumatized. There's so much trauma in every layer. And we know and we trust that you see, and your heart breaks as well, that a young person or an older person or a person of any age who is in segregation, solitary confinement, is not alone, and yet feels so desperately alone, and you are there and you feel with them. And so we pray for courage to fight, the fight for justice, the fight for healing, the fight for wholeness. We pray for compassion. We pray for activism. We pray for courage to have the conversation beyond this room. We pray for our legislators, that they would see, that they would feel, that they'd be moved. We're thankful for the corrections officers who have gone the extra mile, who've gone to Norway, learned of different systems, and come back changed and wanting to change our own systems. We're thankful for the people of NAMI, the people who work with mental health. We want more access to that for our loved ones. Sometimes there are just no more words to say for the deep and profound feelings that we have about all of this, and the deep and profound gratitude that we have for people like Lois who bring these stories to us, and Destiny. Lord, hear our prayers.
Father, we are so grateful for those people who are willing to come forward and are willing to take a stand and to work towards it. We thank you for the love that flows behind all of those people that do that, the true caring for others and loving of other people and their families. There's just so much, Father, to be grateful for, and we thank you so much for the courageous conversations that are occurring now, and the things that we can learn from them and to move forward with. We thank you for the beautiful day and the things around us, because there is beauty in this. And I think that there's something, Father, that we really can say about that, to allow the beauty to come forth around us and spread to others and to help people in any way from a mental health standpoint that we can in order to survive these things and get through them. And we pray that, Father, us knowing that you're hearing our prayers.
God, you created all things and you called it good. And while we know that evil exists in the world, we also know that we are all, every person on this earth, your beloved children. God, help us to remember that. Help us to see you in every person that we meet. And help us to influence and work towards people in our prisons to be able to also see that every person whom they might have charge of is also a beloved child of God. God, we pray for our children and for all of the men and the women and the people who are being held right now. And God, we know there are reasons why some people are held, but we also know that those reasons do not require for them to lose their dignity. Help us to share that message and to push those causes. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer.
When I call my members, besides advocating for bike, and what's the other thing that you're gonna demonstrate on next Wednesday? That I'm rather than those people, like, what would
Family members go
So we want all of the types of visitation reports. Right now, they're
an hour and a half into the visitation time.
administrative